Hello everyone, my name is Marcel, and today I would like to talk to you about why you would want to use the vscode Vim extension. Now, just in case you ended up here by accident, let me try and pique your interest with a short demo. Here is my vscode. I'm going to attempt to edit this short file without touching the keyboard. This may or may not work, so please wish me luck. Change word, import. Go to equals, delete word, change word from space, right, delete surrounding parentheses, go to opening parenthesis, append name, down, change word name, surround inside word curly braces, insert dollar, change surrounding single quotes backticks. Undo. Redo. Redo. There you go. So yeah, that's been my demo, and you might be wondering how that works, because okay, speech recognition is one thing, I can transcribe what I say, but how did it understand how I want to do my edits? Did I build some kind of artificial intelligence to understand my intentions and do those certain edits to the file? I'm sure that by now you know that the answer is no. This was just Vim. It was a really simple wrapper on top of Vim to take what I say and transcribe it in a very simple manner, as in if I said change word name, it would just type CW name, as in change word name, or if I said delete surrounding parentheses, it would say D for delete, S for surrounding, and a parenthesis for parentheses. So that's Vim, and here is what I really like about Vim. It's Vim's editing experience. Now, Vim takes a very different approach to editing text than your normal text editor, because in your normal text editor, the general mindset is that if you press any key on the keyboard that is a visually representable character, then your intention is adding that character to your document. If you press the letter A, it adds the letter A to your document. And so the default mode of operation is adding text. If you want to do anything else, such as navigating the document, deleting existing text, changing existing text, manipulating existing text, maybe copying and pasting or moving in some other way, then you have two options. First, either you need some special keys on your keyboard with this dedicated purpose, such as the arrow keys for moving around, or home and end, page up, page down. Maybe backspace for deleting backwards and delete for deleting forwards. Or you need to press some kind of key combination to make that happen, usually by holding out one or more control keys or modifier keys. Control, Shift, Command if you're on a Mac, Alt or Option. And so what happens is, if you want to get anything done, you either need a special key or you need multiple keys at once, or maybe even both. Like if you want to move right by an entire word instead of just right by one character, you need to hold down Control and the right arrow key. Now, Vim, on the other hand, thinks about text editing very differently. Vim has the mindset that adding new text is only one possible way of editing a document, and it's just as well possible that you just want to navigate your existing document, or maybe you want to delete something that's already in it, maybe you want to change something that's already in it, or copy, paste, stuff like that. And therefore, the mode in which Vim starts up, the so-called normal mode, is configured so that if you just press a key on the keyboard that could be printed, it doesn't actually add that to your document by default. It interprets that as a command. And command can mean adding text, command can mean deleting text, command can mean manipulating text in some other way. This also means that it doesn't need to rely on special keys on your keyboard. It can just use the normal letters and numbers and symbols for moving around and for changing your text. And it also doesn't really need you to press down multiple keys at once normally, because you can just put together your Vim commands from these normal letters and characters. And just like I said, appending the string name was A for append and then name the string, or changing the surrounding single quotes to backticks look like C for change, S for surrounding, single quote for single quote, and backtick for backtick. Actually, let me try and show that to you. There you go. It's the same document as I started out in vscode, but now you will also see what it is that the speech recognition engine understood from what I said, and what is the Vim command literally that it typed into vscode. Change word, import. Go to equals. Go to equals. Go to equals. To forward. To forward. To forward. Twice forward. That doesn't seem to work. Okay, forward. 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 Anyway, you get the point. Delete surrounding single quotes. Delete surrounding single quotes. Find opening parenthesis. Append name. Append name. Yeah, stuff like that. I think my fans are spinning up real bad, and it's messing with the speech recognition. But in either case, I think you get the point. And so, just to summarize what's happening here, the Vim editing experience is really different to what you might be used to in your default text editor. And imagine if I tried to do the same exercise in, you know, a normal text editor, and I would have to go, okay, down, 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 right, right, right. Okay, now hold down shift. Okay, now write by a word, write by a word. Okay, you can release shift, now press backspace, and now start typing. Also, if you wanted to undo that, you would have to keep pressing Ctrl Z until you got back to the point where you actually wanted to be, because you did a series of changes or you know, manipulations to a document, whereas with Vim, most of these things, these comments are like units of operations. You can just say change surrounding single quotes to backticks, and that's a single operation. So then you can say undo, and it just undoes it. And so that's really nice. That's the thing, that Vim editing operations are very high level. You don't have to explain to him how to go somewhere or how to change something. You just have to kind of say out what you want it to do. And that also makes it super duper efficient. You just get by with much fewer keystrokes. And because you don't have to keep holding down Control and Shift and do multiple things and then jump back and forth to backspace and arrows, your hands just rest on the home row of the keyboard, and it's just a couple of keystrokes. This makes it very, very comfortable. Also, as I just mentioned, it's undoable. So operations that you do to your document are seen as one unit of change, and then you can just undo that unit of change, or you can repeat it. Let's say your cursor stood in a word and you said surround inside word single quotes, and then you just put single quotes around the word. Then you go to some other word. You don't have to say the same thing again. You can just press dot on your keyboard, and it just repeats the last action that you did, and it just surrounds the new word with single quotes as well, which is really nice. And so once you get used to this, going back to navigating with arrow keys and jumping back and forth and doing all these little edits yourself manually on the low level, it just becomes very tiring, and you just wish to go back to Vim. But it's not only that. You might not know this because I also didn't know this, but Vim actually is an extremely capable and powerful editor, and it has a bunch of features, a little bit hidden, but it has all of them. So just a quick list, and by no means the full list of what Vim can do. It can do syntax highlighting, it can do auto-completion, it can fold, and it can indent your document automatically. It has bookmarks called marks, and it has a jump list, which means it remembers where your cursor was previously in the document or in other documents. It also remembers where you did your last edit to the document, so you can just jump back and forth between those. You can split your window into multiple windows if you prefer. You can have diffing, like a Vim git diff. You can have sessions, which means it can save what were your open documents when you closed the software, and it can reopen them for you if you want it to. It has a built-in terminal if you like that kind of thing, and it's extremely configurable. You can really customize it to your liking, especially because it has support for plugins, and with plugins opportunities really open up. There's a great plugin architecture around Vim. There are lots and lots of great high quality plugins out there. So with plugins, if you want, you can have things like a file tree on the left hand side of your editor, just like you have in VS Code, the little explorer. You can have great Git support, so you can do Git operations from Vim, or you can see which lines were changed on the left hand side of the editor. You can do debugging in Vim. You can have lots of nice color themes, and you can have multiple cursors, although with Vim can do everything out of the box that you would want to do with multiple cursors. But if you like your multiple cursors, you can have that in Vim with plugins. And so Vim is really great software when it comes to editing text and editing code in particular. Well, let's just step back and take a look at the big picture, because so far I've been talking about the good, but of course there is also a bad side and a downside to Vim. So I'll dive a little bit into that before talking about what I think is the best solution. The bad side of Vim, yeah, I think this is best shown by just another demo. So let me try and share my screen again. This is now my terminal, my shell. And if I just say, okay, I wanna, let me edit the same JavaScript file that I edited before. This is what you get with Vim. This is all. The tabs on the top, those are my shell tabs, my terminal tabs, so they don't belong to Vim. That's the thing. Yeah, so it's pretty bare bones, right? You don't get a lot, really. You don't get the syntax highlighting. You can enable it, but you don't get it by default. You don't get a menu, you don't get a sidebar, you don't get anything. So if you don't already know how to use Vim, you're in trouble. There is a joke about how you can generate a random string. If you open Vim, give it to a junior developer and tell them to quit, because it's really not very obvious how you would want to quit this piece of software, because there is no visual element for it, there is no textual in for it, and the usual ways that you would want to try, like escape or maybe Q, they don't work. And so it's a little bit tricky. Now, something that people repeatedly told me is that the Vim built-in help is excellent, and whenever I'm in doubt, I should just type :help, and it will help me. But this is what happens when you type that. See, it split my screen. I didn't want it to do that. It's now help is here up here, and then my document is down here, but now I can't really see what's going on up here because this split is too small. And so maybe I want to close it, but how the hell do I do that? So yeah, I think you get the point. This is Vim. Vim is not very user friendly in this sense. It's yeah, the app UX is, first of all, it's not discoverable. By which I mean there is no menu bar. If you wanna, like, you'd normally wanna click through the menu items to see where you can find certain functions and how you can accomplish certain things. You don't get to do that in Vim. In VS Code, you might have a little sidebar that, you know, has icons for your file explorer, for your extensions, for your Git, for your debugging. Yeah, you don't get to have that with Vim. So yeah, it's pretty stripped down to the very, very basics. It also doesn't have good defaults. Just like I mentioned, it has syntax highlighting, it has support for that for sure, but it doesn't enable it for you by default. Actually, you have to set up lots of things to make it from where it is by default to a usable editor. And that's my next point. It needs a lot of setup. So it can do auto-completion, it can do IntelliSense, it can do debugging and type checking and all that kind of good stuff. But it needs a lot of work to get there. There is a lengthy YouTube video tutorial, 20-something minutes, with the title "How to make Vim look and behave like VS Code" or something along those lines. And it just, I think it's really telling that you need that much work or that amount of work to actually get there. It needs a lot of configs, it needs a lot of, you need to install a lot of plugins, and then you need to tweak them, and you need to figure out how they work, and you need to maintain your setup all the time. You have this settings file called vimrc, which you carry around, and then you constantly try to tweak it to make it work the way you want it to, and it needs a lot of work. It needs a lot of work, especially opposed to VS Code, which is just nice and helpful out of the box. Actually, a lot of my colleagues don't really do anything with VS Code. I mean, they just install it and they're good to go. And I think this really speaks about how VS Code has really good defaults and really good helpful functionality out of the box without installing or configuring anything. And one more thing about Vim is that it's been developed in the age of terminal-based editors, which means it can only display characters. So when it tries to separate documents or the file tree from your document, it's going to use characters. It cannot have a different font or a different character size for your file explorer, for example. Or you cannot have little pop-ups, you cannot have tooltips, you cannot have squiggly red underlines for your linter warnings. You cannot have any of that because all it can do is characters. And that's, you know, if that's something that's important to you, then this is something that you should be aware of. And so that's, you know, that's kind of a more balanced picture of Vim. But of course, here's what I recommend you to do. You take VS Code, which is the editor that you already know, you already like, you already are familiar with, and then you just install the extension called VS Code Vim, which is a Vim emulator, which means it tries to behave the same way as Vim behaves, but inside of VS Code. And that's good for you because you get the extremely efficient and comfortable and nice editing experience, text editing and code editing experience of Vim, but you get to keep the nice UI and nice user experience of VS Code. And that's a killer combo. You get to keep IntelliSense, just like it worked as the intelligent auto-completion inside VS Code. From Vim, you get to keep your modes like normal mode, insert mode, and you get to keep your registers, which is something like multiple clipboards, but even smarter. You get that super intelligent and efficient undo redo that I was talking about, you get that most of the time. Not all. It's not perfect, but it's much better than what you would normally have. And you do get the repetition of comments like, okay, I surrounded something with parentheses, now keep surrounding these other things with parentheses. You get to have your key remappings. So VS Code will read your vmarc file, and if you actually said, okay, I want to use some other key for some certain functionality because that's the way I prefer it, then it's gonna honor that. And it can read some of your settings from your vmarc file, and it can emulate some of the plugins. But here's the kicker. I told you already that Vim is extremely configurable. That's because it has a little thing called the Vim script, which is this scripting language-like thing that you can use to configure Vim, to power Vim, and to write extensions or plugins in. And you can access Vim's built-in functionality in many, many ways using Vim script. However, VS Code doesn't run Vim script. It doesn't work that way. It just emulates Vim, but the Vim behavior is implemented in TypeScript in a VS Code plugin. And so if you have a plugin that you use in your everyday work in Vim, that's going to be written in Vim script, and you cannot just use that in VS Code Vim. Now, the VS Code Vim team has implemented or emulated a handful of very useful and very popular Vim plugins, but certainly not all of them. There is lots and lots that they don't have, and so you have to accept that you might not have your favorite plugin. That's the scripting and most plugins part. Details. It's not a one-to-one match to the Vim editing experience either. It gets close, but it's not perfect. This is not something that bothers me in my everyday work, but Vim veterans will tell you that it's annoying to them that there are slight details where the Vim emulation is not the same as Vim itself. Settings. It does read a handful of settings from your vmarc file, but the rest you have to configure in VS Code in its settings.json, which is not that nice. It also has bugs, let's be honest. It's not perfect, it does weird things at times. And performance, even though I personally think that VS Code is really close to an IDE in its functionality and it's really helpful, and compared to how much it does and how much it helps you, it's still very quick and snappy. So I think VS Code is really good in this aspect. It's still nowhere near Vim, especially on larger files, larger projects. You'll see VS Code starts to lag, whereas Vim doesn't. So that's just something that you have to be prepared for. However, all in all, I personally still think that it's worth doing this. It's worth using the VS Code extension. And so let me just try and summarize what I would like you to take away from this talk. First of all, if you did become interested and you want to give it a go, which I encourage you to, then this is my advice in getting started. First of all, if you open a Vim summary, tutorial, cheat sheet type of thing on the internet, you'll be overwhelmed by the number of comments, and then you're still only just at navigation. And I think that's just a bad approach. And they give you way too many comments in the beginning, and you should just start with a small subset that's already enough to move around and edit text efficiently. And I personally started learning Vim multiple times, and multiple times I gave up because there were just so many different comments to memorize for moving around in the document and then starting to edit the document. And only when I actually learned Vim did I realize that most of those are not necessary to get started. You don't need all of those. It's a much smaller subset that you can already get started with, and so I have my own collection of what I think is a good starting step for beginners, and I'm going to link that to you. The other thing is you should probably use Vim for just editing a single file if you just need a little editor, a scratch pad or something like that, and you don't need to open up VS Code for that. But if you do that, I recommend that you, instead of using the terminal-based Vim, you use a graphical Vim like gvim, or MacVim if you're on a Mac, which just behaves like a normal application on your computer and is just much nicer from a usability perspective in terms of it has menus, it has a close button, it behaves like you would expect it to behave. But if you do edit a project and you work on code, I recommend that you use the vscode Vim extension. And the way that I recommend you to get started and the way that I was actually able to incorporate Vim into my daily work is that every morning I would enable the Vim extension and then I would start working using it. And then 5 to 10 minutes later, I would get fed up and I would quit because, you know, at the very beginning, it's going to slow you down. Even if in the long run, it makes you more efficient in the very beginning when you don't yet have those commands ingrained in your muscle memory, it's going to be cumbersome and you're going to be much slower and you're going to feel frustrated about trying to get work done and being hindered by the editor that you try to use. And so I recommend that you start using Vim at the beginning of the day and use it as long as you can. And when you get fed up, just disable it and keep editing the text as you used to. But the next day, in the beginning, enable it again. And that's what I did. And then, you know, a week or two later, I was getting maybe half an hour in Vim mode. And then I would disable it and keep working normally. And then a week or two later, I would go all the way from morning to lunch. And then maybe after lunch, I was like, okay, just leave this, go back to normal. And then, you know, it kept getting longer and longer, the time period where I was able to put up with Vim. And then I actually got to the point where I went the entire day of using Vim and not wishing to go back. And so that's how I actually became a full-time Vim key bindings is. For references, I would like to point you to aka.ms for Microsoft /vscode_vim. That's just the VS Code Vim extension homepage. That's where you can install it from, or you can install it from the editor, of course. The little beginner, like getting started kit that I talked about, you can find it at my personal page, andreymarcell.who/p/vim. If you like conference talks, so you like listening to these kind of things, I recommend that you search for Vim language on YouTube. There is a great talk called Mastering the Vim Language or something like that. I recommend you listen to that to get a good handle on how to think about these commands. And the Vim Tutor is just a little command line utility that's installed on your computer if Vim is also installed. It's an interactive tutorial that walks you through the Vim key bindings and keystrokes and how to use it. So I recommend that you try it out. And all in all, this has been my talk for today. Thank you very much for your attention and see you next time. Bye bye.